Hello, everyone. You're listening to a Gorecki podcast. My goal with this show is to talk to interesting people about engineering, technology, and their experiences. My guest today is Jake Laser. Jake is a professional engineering YouTuber known for designing and building technology often found in fiction, like many of the Marvel superhero movies. His YouTube channel, JlaserVideo, has amassed multiple millions of views, and the tech that he designs and builds deserves it. Some of his projects have included a working electric jetpack that he has flown with, working wall climbers that he has used to climb the outside of a building like Spider-Man, an electric drone that he can stand on and fly around with like the Green Goblin, and boots that allow him to appear like he's walking on water. It was a great time talking with Jake about his YouTube journey, the challenges he has faced along the way, and where he sees his channel going in the future. I hope you guys enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Jake Laser. So let's start off with kind of give a quick intro of who you are, kind of what you
hmm
do, and how you kind of got to where you are today, and we can
hmm
kind of go from there.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Jake Laser. It's not a fake name. Uh, I am a engineering YouTuber, I guess, for lack of a better, term. I've been doing this probably about 10 years at this point, like full time for the last two, maybe three. So been at it for a while. But yeah, I basically take, fictional ideas from movies or, whatever else we come up with, and try and make, real working prototypes or, um, yeah, try and bring those ideas into the real world. So some projects we've done, we did an Iron Man jet suit that lets you fly around, which is I feel like kind of why we vibed because you were
Oh
also
yeah.
working on jetpack.
Oh
So
yeah.
definitely cool connection there. So yeah, just like a bunch of EDFs on your hands, you can fly around. I made these Spider-Man wall climbers that let you climb buildings. Um, Done like a bouncing Captain America shield to bounce back to you, Thor hammer that shoots like 12-foot lightning bolts or something. So just like a lot of pop culture stuff from movies that everyone's super excited about that we try and make real. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
that's
kind of what we
awesome.
do.
You
hmm
actually brought up a point which I wanted to touch on, which so I had seen like throughout college, I had seen some of your videos intermittently, and this was way
hmm
before we had ever met. But I
hmm
didn't realize, like, getting ready for this conversation, I kind of went back and watched some of the old ones. I didn't realize you had been doing
mm
this for, like you said, like 10 years at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
like way too long.
well, I was gonna say, like,
Yeah,
so how did that kind of all come about? How did you start off
it's a
being
good
interested
question.
in making stuff, and then how did you kind of decide to start doing YouTube stuff with that? Did you have people around you that like how did you get into making stuff? Because not a lot of
hmm
people do that.
I know. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, classic answer, like I was one of the kids who was just always interested in like Legos and uh, every building toy I could get my hands on, I was interested in it. And like from there, I don't know, I just kind of like stopped buying these pre-packaged like kits and just started making things on my own. I was like, oh, I could do the same thing that I'm doing with Legos, just with like stuff I find around the house. So like, cardboard, duct tape, scissors, like all of that. I would build like forts. I remember just from like old boxes we had. Built a tree house. I was horribly unsafe, by the way. I literally I put up supports to make it look safe, but they weren't connected to anything. Um,
That's hilarious.
anyways, like yeah, but yeah, I was just like always the kid that wanted to just create with whatever I had. And my favorite, or one of my favorite, you know, outcomes of all of that was showing people the things I make and just seeing the reaction. So yeah, like my friends would come over, I'd show them the latest thing I'd made. They'd be like, "Whoa, that's awesome!" And I'd be like, "Thank you. Yeah, this is really cool." And just like explaining how it works to people, I really like. So, um, and I guess I was doing that through elementary school, middle school, whatever. And at the same time, I was also interested in videography and making just like cool little edits with my friends. Like I would take my camera out and when we went snowboarding, and just throw in an iMovie and make cool little edits. Again, they were pretty shitty, but like looking back on it, but I thought they were cool at the time. Um, so yeah, those kind of interests found themselves, connecting. And I was making videos of the things I would make. And then I was able to share, these ideas with the whole world pretty much, or at that point, like 10 people and like my
Right,
mom.
right.
But like still, like the idea was out there that people were seeing my stuff. And I was also, of course, watching YouTube, all of these like makers like Colin Furs and like Kip
The
K, I think was like
yeah, the OG
the
guys.
OGs,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
OG makers. So like I was
Hip
definitely inspired
K.
by those guys too. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
No, dude,
So like
it's funny
I don't know
because
if you watch those guys.
everything, it's funny because everything you just said actually feels like a lot like what my childhood was too, where
Yeah.
I enjoyed getting up early by myself when nobody else was up and like building stuff. And it started with
Hmm.
same thing, started with Legos, did a lot of that, and
Yeah.
then slowly
Hmm.
transitioned into like real materials, let's say. Um,
Yeah.
and same thing, like I remember watching like the DIY spy hack type
Yeah. Yeah.
videos. Yeah,
Like
like
the laser shit they
yeah,
was
yeah,
doing.
like
Yeah.
hiding stuff in a Mentos tin or whatever. Like,
Exactly.
no, dude, I definitely remember all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I could completely agree. It was always fun to show people too. And even, I mean, even now when I
Hmm.
work on projects, like people come over and they're like, what crazy shit are you working on this time? So
I know.
I totally know what that's like. And on top of that, then I used to skateboard a lot. And so I
Hmm.
used to, that's how I got into videography. It was like
It's so funny.
skateboarding
Yeah.
crappy camcorder, like, the
Yep.
video I come across them every now and then, and I still have old clips that are just like the worst quality, but,
Yeah.
so it's really interesting
That's
to see
that's
that.
funny.
Yeah. And
You
so,
totally get the pipeline. Like
yeah,
it's like probably an alternate universe. I would be working at like a jetpack company or
yeah.
something
Well,
like,
and
you know what I mean? Like,
it's interesting how, like, especially as you get older, all of those small skills start to, or all those small interests, if you're, in my mind, if you're doing it right, they all start to kind of collide. So it's like you have a
hmm
small interest in making videos and kind of being creative and storytelling, and then you have some interest
definitely.
in building stuff, and then you have some small interest in like interacting with people, and that all starts to collide. And I think you find a cool
Hmm.
resonance when that all starts to work out and you start to get good at each little piece.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the thing I really like about doing what I do and making videos about engineering is, you get to be creative in so many ways. Like there's the video side of things, there's and obviously there's the engineering side of things, but like within that, you combine like the artistic side of things with mechanical, and it's like all this like blend of just super, creative, this end product that comes out, and it's very rewarding too. Like once you finish like a hard thing, that's another thing I really like.
So one question I have for you is like back in those early days,
Hmm.
and maybe you didn't have this experience, but like when I really started getting into this stuff, I was
Hmm.
awful at it, and it was
Yeah,
probably really cringy. And then on top of that,
so
like
crazy.
I'm a nerd. I started like I was the kid that had like a pencil behind his ear for most of
Hmm.
elementary school, and I got made fun of a lot for that one. I don't know why,
Hmm.
but in the early days, did you, obviously now it's pretty well received, but back in those early days,
Um,
did people kind of give you shit for some of the stuff that you did? Were you kind of an outlier in some of the stuff
mm,
that you were following?
I was like, it's kind of a weird relationship because like I kept it very on the down low unless it was like my really close friends or like family, or like I wouldn't really talk about it in school. I wouldn't like I did other things. Like I did, normal people things too. Like I played sports and, whatever, like would hang out with people. Like did music and whatnot. So I had that side of myself, but then I also had like the YouTube side of myself that I just never talked about again because like of the things you were saying. Like
Mm-hmm.
I thought I would get made fun of because it was kind of cringy.
You
Like
got to
the
start
funny thing is
somewhere.
like exactly, but like when no one's like really watching or very few people are like, you know, before anything gets good, people think you're crazy, and then like you do like it starts to pop off and people think you're a genius. You know what I mean? So, but like that transition period is very tough. So I kept it very, on the DL. Um, and yeah, like, cause yeah, I was afraid of being made fun of for it. So like, and yeah, the projects weren't good. So like, I kind of, and then maybe in a weird way, I was kind of like aware of that. Um, so like, I wouldn't really show it to anyone unless like I really thought it was good, and then they'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's pretty cool." So
Yeah.
yeah, it
So,
was definitely a bit of that. But, yeah.
well, so I was going to say then, so at what point did at what point was there like a transition? And maybe there wasn't a single point, but like I
Hmm.
imagine at some point there's a transition of like kind of this, you're keeping it on the down low, you kind of do it
Hmm.
in your free time. And when did
Yep.
it start to transition to like kind of a definition of like this is who I am and this is like what I do, and I'm actually putting a lot of time and effort now into these? Was it like a slow gradual thing, or was there
It
kind of
was
a
so
point?
slow.
Okay,
Yeah.
it
The
just kept
thing is
going.
like, yeah, like I remember like back like early high school, like I had one video that like popped off, got a couple million views or whatever. I would like sometimes talk about that, and then people would like think that was cool because they saw big numbers and like this cool thing that I made.
Hmm.
So like, but again, like I wouldn't bring it up. People would just like maybe find out about it, or like
Yeah.
that's kind of how I've always been. Like I'm this like introduce myself as, just a regular guy, whatever, I do what I do. And then they might find out about it from someone or like, but I would never bring it up. Or like maybe they'd see something on my phone about it or whatever, but I'm never going to like talk to them about it. Like it wasn't like my personality at all, ever. I went through that like, through high school. And then in college too, it was kind of the same thing, even though like
Mm.
at that point I was like, I had a couple 100,000 subscribers. So like, you know, we're on our way. Like at that point, I'm like making consistent videos. They're all getting, doing okay and whatnot. But I'm still not talking about it. Like for whatever reason, I just like it wasn't like, especially the school that I went to, and honestly, probably all colleges, like no one was doing YouTube. No one was, especially like YouTube engineering.
Yeah.
Like when people think of YouTube, they think of, at least in my experience, like just lifestyle stuff, like
Vlogging.
crazy vlogging, exactly,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
pranks, whatever it is. Like, so that's the um, kind of the association people have with YouTube. So it's like very hard to just casually explain what I do. So I just didn't,
Well, it's
unless it comes up like organically.
it's interesting because I think now people are starting to, I think in the last few years YouTube has really started to
Hmm.
change to being a
A little
platform
more
where you
mainstream.
can really
Yeah.
learn a lot, and people are starting
Oh
to
yeah.
listen to podcasts, and people are starting to have a lot more serious conversation, and
Hmm.
there's still a lot of the other stuff, but yeah, especially years ago, I think, yeah, this idea that you could be a professional YouTuber and like do that for a
Hmm.
living or something, I think that was there was a very different way of looking at that. um
Very much smaller. Yeah.
so
Much
then
smaller
going
group.
so then going through college, and as you're
Hmm.
starting to get bigger and stuff, at some point at some point you were probably faced with the decision of like, am I going to do this professionally? Am I going to do this
Hmm.
like, what was did that decision kind of occur? By the time you were like graduating, was it pretty clear
Hmm.
like I can support myself with this, or was it kind of like let me give it a
Yeah.
try and kind of see what happens here?
That's a good question. So, through college, I never really had to work a normal job. Um, I was just like treated YouTube as like, this other activity I did. I like really enjoyed it too. So like wasn't hard to spend time on it. But yeah, it would make me more money like than I ever could working like a part-time job. So at that point, I was like, okay, like I don't know like if it's gonna pay me as much as like a real job or a traditional job when I graduate, but like I'm doing all right now. Um, and it's part time too. Like I was doing like at a studying physics and math and fucking doing sports and whatever. So like I never really given it all my attention. Because I was always doing other things at the same time. So I graduated in 2020, and that's kind of when shit hit the fan with COVID and everything like that. So real jobs weren't really an option as much anymore either. Like everything would be virtual or like if you were lucky enough to get a job. So that was kind of the tip the edge when I was like, okay, I could just try this full time. Um, so I was like, I'm from middle of nowhere in Vermont. So I was like, I don't want to be here anyways. I'd rather just move to LA where at least the weather's nice.
Right.
So yeah, one of my buddies in college, who's now my manager, I was uh, just like, let's just go to LA. And he was crazy enough to say yes.
Well,
So
so
at least I knew, yeah.
Well, that's
which
what I was
I'm
going to ask. Actually, there was I had
mhm.
another question, which was like, with Christian, right? Like you
Yeah,
guys met in
Christian.
college, and then,
Yeah.
how did that? I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Did you guys become friends over your YouTube stuff, or was it just completely random? You just became friends, and then over
Yeah,
time, you kind of introduced him to what you were doing?
exactly. Yeah, he was always we were like friends first. He didn't really know any about, again, like keep it very on the deal. So
Right,
we
right.
met like doing crew. We both like road crew.
Okay.
And we would just like hang out a bunch. We just, got to be really good friends. And then, eventually like people like who I was close with obviously knew what I was doing. So he knew the YouTube stuff. And like if I ever needed help, he was always like down to just help me shoot something, hold a camera or whatever, like help me film some shit. Um, but yeah, like just he was always accustomed to what I was doing, or he's more in tune with what I was doing. And he's an amazing people person and like just studied business and um, was just had a lot of skills that I didn't. So
So
like
that works
I'm
out pretty
like
well
all right
then.
with people. Yeah, oh yeah, that's what I mean. So it was like a good match. Uh, so yeah, I just asked him if he wanted to come. He thought about it for a while. Like he was also like applying to other jobs too at the time, but then I think over time it just sort of clicked. He's like, I don't want to like have to go into sales. Like this seems way more fun, especially now.
Right,
So
right.
he made the move with me, and that helped a lot because I at least knew somebody out here, and a couple of my buddies were also moving to LA at the same time. So it
Well,
made the transition a little easier.
it's
So
cool
yeah.
that you have that support, because I think
Hmm.
especially when you're doing these kinds of things, especially when you're doing them solo, it can be pretty hard.
Yeah,
And especially
totally.
when you start talking about, and I want to get into this too about the business side of
Hmm.
things, but
Hmm.
when you start doing some of these things, initially you just want to do the fun stuff. I just want to build it, I want
Yeah,
to design it, I want to film it. And then at some point though, it
exactly.
starts to get, there's a lot of parts where like, man, like this part of this just really sucks. I don't want to do it. I don't know enough about it and I have to figure it
Hmm.
out, but it's not even something I want to figure out. Like, and
Hmm.
so I totally understand that. And it's funny
Exactly.
because I've had experiences too where like, I think a big one is like when I was working on my jet suit, I'm like, I need somebody there to either film or hold the fire
Yeah,
extinguisher or like just help me
exactly.
out. And I would ask friends to do it. And I think after initially people, they're kind of like they would hesitate a bit where they're like, sure, if you really need a hand, but like this is I've never had to do anything like this before, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
But then at some point it kind of normalizes. And so it was the first
Hmm.
few times Christian helped you out with stuff, was it kind of like
Hmm.
I don't want to say awkward, but kind of was it a weird experience because you're used to doing things by yourself and then you're now having to explain to him like here's how we're going to do this, or was it
Hmm.
pretty fluid?
That's a good question. I mean, I'd already had experience with people helping me out before. Like in high school, I just have like one of my buddies sometimes, help me out too. So like it was definitely a more of a transition to figure out how to let people help or like manage people like sort of turn into a small production kind of. Um, but at the end of the day, like the easiest way to do it is with someone you're really comfortable with, like they are your friend. We're just like goofing off and having a good time. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
it'd be cool to get this shot. So at the end of the day, it's like kind of like we're just hanging out and having some fun. And he enjoyed it too. So like, because we're always building something interesting. So um, new experience for him. You know, I get the person to help me film. It's kind of a win-win. Um, yeah, it definitely has been like I've become much more comfortable in the spotlight and kind of like directing people at this point. We have like a bunch of people now, and it's like things have become much more of a production.
Right.
But yeah, there are things that I don't like as much, which is very helpful to have other people who are good at those.
Yeah, well,
So
that's the thing. You can't be good at everything, and starting to
yeah.
learn where you actually, especially in a business setting like this, learning where your
Hmm.
strengths are and learning where actually to delegate because somebody else is going
Yeah.
to be better at it. And one,
Yeah.
you don't have to do it now, and two, somebody's going to do it
Exactly.
better.
Yeah.
Um, was it
That
nice having did you and Christian move at the same time to LA, and was it nice to have that support in terms of actually showing up to a new place with somebody that you're really good friends with versus having to do that entire thing by yourself?
Oh, totally. It really made it like possible and enjoyable because I also moved out. It was me, Christian, and another buddy I knew from high school who all got a place out here. We're all roommates. Um, and yeah, like the world kind of shut down, but like we all vibed really well together. And, it was just us making videos. And my other roommate who doesn't really do anything, um, he does something else. He does real estate.
He doesn't do
Um,
anything at all.
yeah, he just kind of sits around. No, he does like commercial real estate, which is pretty nice to have another person in the area or like in our house that doesn't do what we do because it kind of like breaks the tension too. Because if it was just us, honestly, like we would probably be talking about business and like the channel 24/7. So it's
Yeah.
nice to like have another person who we can just then we're like, okay, we're all just hanging out now and being friends, versus just always talking about business. So if you are like really good friends with someone, but also in business, it's like, notoriously for a lot of people, it is very challenging to like have that separation. Like they say, like don't work with your friends or something. But I think if you're both in it for the right reasons and are friends first, then it can totally work, and it's honestly really amazing. So
I think I agree. I think that really depends on the people, and it depends
yes,
on how
100%.
good you are at communicating and handling emotions and conflict. Because I
Exactly.
talked with a few friends of mine, they're brothers, and they started an airplane
Mhm.
company together. They're
The Wright
building up.
brothers.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah. Wait
Um,
a minute.
Wait a minute. No, there's another set of brothers making an airplane.
Okay,
But there's three
that's
of
funny. I
them, and
bet
they
they get that a
started.
lot.
Yeah, that's pretty. I don't know if I've actually heard that joke. That's actually really funny. I'm gonna have to pass that
Uh,
along to them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But they're building a
If it's
composite
yeah.
airplane kit. It's like carbon fiber.
Okay,
It's a kit that people are gonna be able to build in their like
nice.
garages and stuff. And they basically went full time on it, and it's just three of them. They're all brothers, and
Oh,
so
cool.
I kind of had that. I did a podcast episode with them, and I talked to them about
Hmm.
like what was it like doing business with your brothers? Like, is that a challenge, or is that like a strength? And they thought it was a strength because they found that they could communicate in ways that they probably couldn't do with like coworkers. And so that
Hmm.
allowed a lot of open communication and a lot of in conflict too. There was conflict, but like they knew how to manage it better because they were brothers. And so
Okay.
that just kind of reminded me, like, if you're good friends and you can
Hmm.
communicate well, I actually, depending on how it goes, I imagine that could be a huge strength for you guys. So
Totally. Yeah. I think I think it is too because you trust them more is another
mm.
thing. Like
Yeah, so
so
you know a lot
yeah,
more about them, and so okay, that's interesting.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you trust their
Like
motives, and
especially
you trust what
trust
they're
their
trying to
motives,
do
trust
is yeah.
exactly. You know them as a person more than just like a worker. So you can go further. Like say like we're doing a stunt or something and like I I like actually actively trust that he set up the safety equipment right or like he got like the right people involved or or like whatever task it is. Honestly, it doesn't even need to be like a super dangerous situation. I just like trust that he did it,
Well, it's
you know?
interesting too because you know then that if he's disagreeing with you for some reason, then you also
Hmm.
know like this isn't coming necessarily from a place of like malice or something else. It's
Yeah.
like maybe he's actually concerned about your safety or
Yeah.
something else. So you can take that
Hmm.
moment. That's interesting.
Definitely. Yeah.
Um, Changing tact a little bit as you kind of moved
Hmm.
out here, you're deciding to pursue YouTube full time.
Hmm.
Um, what were your parents' kind of response to that? Because I
Hmm.
imagine some parents would be like what the hell are you doing? Like you're not pursuing this traditional path. Like
Yeah.
I can imagine some parents really wouldn't understand, but then I imagine some would really be like, go chase your dreams and like this is great.
Hmm.
So was there a response there at all? Were they kind of like, yeah, just do whatever you're gonna do, or did they have a little bit more of an opinion for that?
Yeah, totally. My parents are more of the latter, as you mentioned. They're much more chill with it. So
Mm,
they'd seen me doing YouTube or, you know, like they saw me, through the whole experience. So I was always gonna do this. Like they
they knew
knew
you
they
were
weren't
in
gonna
it.
stop me. Yeah, they knew I
Yeah,
was in it. They and
yeah.
they had seen like the passion I had and like the growth I was having too really helped. And just showing them some of the numbers and like the fact that this is possible, they were totally on board with it. Um, Obviously, they didn't really like me moving across the country.
I feel that.
That makes it a little harder to see them. Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
you have again similar experiences with all of this.
Oh yeah.
You went out solo, right? or no?
Well,
With
so
your
I
dad?
came out with my dad. He just came just to help me kind of move stuff.
Okay.
Um, that was kind of a tough experience because what had happened was my girlfriend had come out and we had been doing long distance for about a year.
All right. Okay.
And then what ended up happening was like I didn't like my job and where I was at, and I was kind of feeling stuck. And I'm like, I kind of need an
Hmm.
adventure. The thing that was
That's
tough
right.
was all my friends, all my resources, everything I had was in Wisconsin,
Hmm.
except my girlfriend was in California. And so, but
That's a
I'm
pretty
looking at
big
it,
perk.
and for
Yeah.
a while I was like, there's no reason for me to go to California because all of this resourcing I have, all my friends,
Hmm.
everything I have is here. Um,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I was getting too comfortable and too complacent. So I was like,
Yeah.
shit, like if I was ever gonna do this, like this would be the time to do it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we drove it over. It was like a week long trip, and we drove
Yeah.
it with my car just absolutely overloaded.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so similar experience though in terms of,
Absolutely.
and the same thing where they saw how excited I was,
Your
especially
parents? Yeah.
because yeah, because they saw like when I got the opportunity to go work on jetpacks, they're like shit. Like we want
Hmm.
you around and we enjoy having you here, and obviously we like spending time with you. But like clearly this is your dream, this is your passion, and you get to be
Yeah.
closer to your girlfriend. So like
Yeah.
it's unfortunate, but we understand it, you know.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
so I
That's how
totally
my parents were.
very similar experience
Yep.
there.
But I've also known, like, at this point, like, we've hired a couple of people and their parents' reactions are definitely different. We've got one end, like, people, super supportive parents like mine, and the other end, like, parents who are like, please don't work there. Like, come back and get like a safe, steady job or whatever. Like, do something more
Career.
normal. So, yeah. So it's like, you definitely got both ends of the spectrum. Like,
Well, that's great. I
that's what
mean,
it is.
it's a whole it's nice not to have to put energy into fighting other people and trying to convince them that it's the right thing to do. Um,
Mhm.
you kind of seem like a person, if I had to guess, like you're going to do what you're
Mhm.
going to do, kind of regardless of what other people think about it. Maybe not. I'm
I
curious what
mean, I'll
your
take it
thoughts
into
are there.
consideration, but like at the end of the day, like I'm kind of like go with my gut 100%,
Yeah,
like whatever it is.
that's something that
So,
I've picked up, I would say in the last couple of years, which was like a similar thing where I was always going to do what I was going to do. Now, if there's a legitimate criticism or concern, like I'll talk
yeah,
about it. But at the
of
same time,
course.
if it's like, oh, that sounds dangerous, or I don't really like that idea, it's like I'm going to see it through at least.
Mhm.
Um, and that was
Yeah.
one thing going back to your point earlier, where you were kind of saying like with your projects, when you first start doing
Hmm.
something, people are like, oh, that's crazy, that's stupid, why would you do that?
Hmm.
They all have, everyone's got their opinion about it. And then when it works out, everyone's like, oh my God, you're a genius. That's so cool. And I
Hmm.
would say my experience with like when I started working with like the jet engines and stuff, like, me telling people like, yeah, I just spent a couple $1,000s on a jet engine, and everyone's like,
Hmm.
you're doing what? And
Yeah.
it's like, and people,
Why?
yeah, people were like really, really
Yeah.
concerned. And then fast
Yeah.
forward, a year and a half, 2 years, and people are like, dude, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. And that's so awesome. And I wish I was as passionate about something as you are,
Yeah.
and so,
Yep.
but you go through that enough times and you're like, oh, this is just how it goes. Like,
You recognize the pattern. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, that's,
100%.
oh yeah. Another thing I was going to ask then, so there's a couple different ways I want to go, but, going
Hmm.
into, so now if you've done this long enough now, you've actually developed a business out of this, and you kind of touched on it
Hmm.
a little bit where Christian is now doing some of the business side of things and doing some of the
Hmm.
things that maybe you don't find yourself to be as good at.
Hmm.
um how has that experience been of actually going from like just doing YouTube for fun to being like, this is actually my job now that supports me and other people? How has building that experience been, and
Hmm.
has that been stressful? Has that been really cool? Like, how is that,
Hmm.
what have your thoughts about that been?
Yeah. That's a good question. I figured out I actually really enjoy the side of that things, like building a business. It turned out like
Mm,
I like even in high school, I was doing like side jobs. I was like what were some of the things I was doing? Oh, I was selling like phone cases on eBay. I was like I found like public domain books on and like would put them on Kindle for like extra like or Amazon's Kindle for like extra money that way. So I was always doing like some little scheme. So I always like had that in me as well. So I do like the idea of like growing businesses.
So you do
On
have kind of an
so
entrepreneurial
yeah,
side.
yeah, I think I do have sort of an entrepreneurial side of me as well. So, but again, like obviously I'm not as good with people as like Christian or like I don't know. I definitely have places where I'm lacking. So, but no, growing like a business on YouTube has been pretty exciting to me. Because we're in a very unique time where like things are shifting to new media. Like social media is like got a lot of headroom to grow and a lot of expansion. Um, so it's really been cool to take advantage of all of these opportunities, be on like the forefront of where things are going, and just like there's no rule book for any of this. So like the best way to figure this stuff out is talk to your friends who are all also doing the same thing. So I've made a lot of really cool connections. That's been amazing to have these resources. Um, and just finding like new ways of doing things has been really exciting. Like part of the reason I like building things is, doing things that no one's done. So it's kind of the same thing on the business side of things. We find out this new way to make money, like whether it's like selling a product or like just marketing our stuff on all of these other social medias or like, like working with brands or like doing things I didn't think existed. Um, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It has been stressful though, obviously. The more people you bring on, especially, now people are relying on you. Like you have a lot of momentum and like a bunch of eyeballs on you as well. It's like, sure, but I don't know. I don't I kind of I like it more than I don't, definitely. Like
Mhm.
it's 100% been a net positive, just growing this company.
Yeah, there's a couple interesting things that I want to touch on. So I guess part of
Mhm,
that is like super cool that you've been able to grow in this way. Do you feel like
mhm.
the growth has been exponential in some way, or at least non-linear, where it
Mm,
just starts off slow and you get to LA and you're trying to do this thing and things are kind of slowly going along? And did you feel like at some point things really started to accelerate? You start hiring more people. Now you're
mhm.
making double or triple the amount of
Yeah,
money, and now you can start doing
yeah.
crazier projects. And do you feel like that? Did you notice that like fed back on itself, or what's that
No,
experience kind
totally.
of been?
Yeah, like, you know, talking to all of these people out here, like I went further than I thought this would ever go, like moving out here. Like I didn't know you could make anywhere near the amount you can on social media. I didn't know there would be half as much opportunities as there are, but like you wouldn't know that until you come out here. So doing that, it's been yeah, it's been really cool. I don't know if linears or exponentials is the right way, but there have been key points where I felt like we really exploded.
Mm,
Um, so like I think like we were like I had one period in like high school or something where I like really felt like things took an uptick, and then like again in college at one point I was like, okay, like I figured out like this way is working for making videos. And then like right when we came out here, like maybe a couple videos in, I like figured out another step to it, and I feel like there was like another uptick, and that's just been we've been riding that.
okay.
So it's sort of like period by period, I guess.
Oh, so it's more
Um,
like steps instead of
it's
not
steps,
like
it's
a okay.
steps. It's not, yeah. So that's how I would describe it. And then there's like it's getting trickier now to track because we're just like branching off. So it used to be this like sole thing that was YouTube, right?
Hmm.
That's like just me doing that. And then when we got out here, we started like, I brought on another person. So he started like creating other things, that weren't just that. And then, we moved into like all of these other platforms. So basically like all of these other stems grew off of that. And then we started like we're launching like toys now, and we're doing like um just like more deals than I ever thought we would. We're like doing custom projects like for people and whatnot. It's like all of these branches are growing off of this tree. So it's
Interesting.
sort of
Yeah.
hard to keep track of like the growth, but I mean, looking at the numbers, everything's like been going up, and as long as you're like advancing in like a couple of the areas, like you're doing the right thing. Like I don't ever
Well,
want to stay comfortable. Like I always want to like try to be
That's
expanding with
that's
that.
really
What are you
interesting,
gonna say?
actually. Well, I was going to say that's really interesting because now you can, well, I'm actually maybe you can tell me more, but like I imagine
Mhm.
you feel now like you can actually take more risks, as you were saying, because there's like a bunch of different branches now. You can
Mhm.
take some risks on a couple of those branches, and if they don't work out, you still have some of the other branches to keep you going. So have you found
Totally.
like that's given you confidence in trying new things?
Definitely. Yeah. Like, our budgets for everything have gotten a lot bigger. Like we're getting more of these resources. So now I'm okay with putting out, like using more of these resources. And if like a couple things don't work out, like, oh, well, like, you know, when the things that do work out are going to hit even harder. So yes, there is definitely a lot of, we're able to try more things, but now I'm having to learn a whole new set of skills, which is like managing people and like creating like a business, like that. Before it was just like me, Christian, like that was it. Now
Yeah.
it's like 6, 7 of us. So it's definitely growing, and like that side of things has been interesting. It it's you want to make sure every person you're bringing on has like the right intentions and is going to be valuable, and you're going to be able to help them too. I think like that's a key thing I always try and keep in mind is like, you know, what is this person going to be able to bring to us, but also what are we going to be able to do for them? Like
Hmm.
treat them more as like a person, and it has to be like the right fit. Like a lot of companies, or some of my friends even, have grown their companies just like almost too fast, I think,
Mm.
and you end up with like a lot of inefficiencies. It's like sort of like building a tower that's not like, you know, like a Jenga tower that's like the pieces missing. Like you don't want to do that. So you need to have a really strong foundation, and then you can build off of that.
Well, it's interesting.
Otherwise, it's just going to collapse.
Yeah, it's interesting
Mm-hmm.
because initially I always used to think it was like kind of cliche when companies would talk about like their culture and things like that. Like, oh, we've got this great
Mm-hmm.
culture. And I always thought that was kind
Yep.
of, I
Sorry,
always thought,
continue.
oh, you're good. I always thought it was kind of like cliche and kind of like really, but as I've gotten further along and just had different experiences, I've realized like you said, if you grow a company too quickly and you don't
Mm-hmm.
have something that brings the people together, like things don't work
Mm-hmm.
well. And things
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed things work a lot better when you have things like you're working with friends and you trust them and you can rely on them and things like that. And so it's good to hear that. I mean, that's super cool that you guys are working on like building that together.
Yeah.
Um, so throughout this, like you've obviously done with all of your projects and everything, you've done some really hard shit, like some pretty crazy things. And it's cool, like you can all your videos are online and even
Mm-hmm.
the videos, like you show some of the failures and some of the things where like we
Yeah.
made mistakes. But how has
Uh-huh.
I imagine there are times where you like really struggle with something. How has
Mm-hmm.
have you learned to deal with that? Like I imagine, I mean, and you can go into more detail if you'd like, but I imagine there were projects where like nothing works and you keep making mistake after mistake and
Yeah.
you're like, I don't even know if I'm ever going to be able to make this work. How has your ability to kind of cope with that changed at all? Have you gotten better at it, or is it still pretty tough?
I like to think I've gotten better at it. That's like all of my videos, by the way. Like,
Yeah, well, right.
especially,
That's how
like I
engineering
don't, I
goes. It never works on
exactly.
the first try.
It never works, and I genuinely don't know if it will work. And I know it's not like a movie where like you can just sit back and it'll just work out.
Yeah.
It's you. Like you have to
You have
you
to
have to
do
do it.
it.
There's no
Yeah.
reason it
Yeah.
it needs to work out. Like you could just
Yeah.
give up. But at this point, with so many of these projects that do require that, like I have learned that like it genuinely, like, trust your instincts, and just if you need to take a break and come back to it with like fresh eyes and
Hmm.
a fresh brain is like very powerful, when you are like in those like crises moments. So it's a lot of just like knowing how to manage your emotions and frustration, and just thinking through things with a clear head. That's like a super powerful skill that I feel like I'm still learning but have gotten better at. That's like helped me with these projects. Um,
Gotcha. How has
yeah.
kind of going off of that, like how one of the things that I always found interesting with like any kind of creative endeavor, whether it's making music, art, in this case,
Hmm.
YouTube videos, there's
Hmm.
no kind of like what you said, there's no playbook on how to do this really, but
Yeah.
that also means like there's no real schedule. You're not
Hmm.
necessarily working a set time. And so the question I guess I have is like, how have you learned to manage your time? Because I know some YouTubers really get stuck into that thing of like
Hmm.
they just end up feeling like they have to work all the time because they don't know when enough is enough and they just burn themselves out. Like, have you experienced that, and how have you worked on kind of trying to mitigate that?
Yeah. Well, the good thing, and I don't know if this is a good thing. Well, I think it's a good thing, but because I've been doing this for so long, like it's been such like a steady growth. I didn't like just explode into this thing and like have all of these pressures all at once. It was very much like step by step. So I learned like how to not burn myself out. I've burnt myself out plenty of
Mm,
times, don't get me wrong, but like that's just something you figure out. And like the fourth, fifth, sixth time, you're just like depleted of motivation. It's like, okay, well, how do I avoid this in the future? So at this point, I kind of know just how hard to push myself before, and like I can sort of see the burnout coming before it comes. So and then I just slightly scale back, you know, don't work as hard, like do some things to change my perspective, like get out of the house more, just mix it up basically
yeah.
is what you have to do. And trying to keep a set schedule, I think has been very beneficial for me. Like even though I can, if I want to work whenever I want to work, trying to stay on the same schedule as the rest of the world for me has been very beneficial. So like, I work through the weekdays like normal people, and then on the weekends, if I want to work, I will. But like, if I don't want to work during the weekdays or I'm sensing that burnout, the luxury is for me, I don't have to work. I can just do
Yeah.
whatever I want.
Well, and
So,
that's the nice thing too, because often with most of your videos, I imagine there's no real set deadline. Like you can push it
yeah,
back a week if you need to, or well, the
exactly.
same thing too. Like you might have a schedule in mind, but like you said, you're going to run into some problems that you don't expect. So
Yeah, totally.
interesting. So have you found that that's really freeing in a way where you're able to have absolute control over that whole how all of that kind of plays out?
Yeah, I consider myself a pretty motivated person. So I like the pressure I put on myself is I like prefer putting pressure on myself, I don't want people to, or I don't
Externally?
necessarily need people to like, yeah, put like deadlines on things for me. Like I'll do that all on my own. Like don't worry about that. Um, yeah, it is freeing though to like, even though I'm like, will work until I get this like every day or whatever, like knowing that I don't have to, like it's my choice, doing it.
Yeah.
My choice is like what is almost all the freedom that I need.
That's really something interesting with humans where if you take on a challenge voluntarily,
Mhm.
you're actually activating a different part of your brain versus
Mhm.
when a stress or a
You're like
challenge
cornered or like,
is
yeah,
placed upon you
yeah,
involuntarily. Um,
definitely.
and yeah, there's an entirely different way of viewing when you're going after a challenge yourself and you've actively chosen to do it and to take it on. Um,
It's like you're working from like ahead rather than from behind. You're not
yeah,
playing catch
yeah,
up. You're like getting
reactively.
further. Exactly. You're working yeah, not reactively.
How
Uh,
has So throughout this whole thing, obviously between all the social media, like the different platforms, I
mhm.
imagine like do you look at comments a lot? Do you read those? And
Mhm.
I imagine you have a lot of people telling you that you've inspired them to go into engineering. Or maybe not, I guess. What do a lot of the comments look like? And if you do get a lot of those, like how do you feel about that? Does that make you excited or
Yeah, I love like, especially like right when a video drops, I'll, be in the comments for a while, just like reading all the feedback. And it is very rewarding to see. Like, I'm lucky enough to have most, like 99% of it be positive.
oh
And
really?
like, oh yeah, yeah, it's amazing. Like, I don't think like, because I'm not naturally a very polarizing person. I
Yeah.
just like my thing, like you don't really need to know a whole lot about me. It's just like the videos about the things I make.
Yeah.
Um, which so it's like when I see these comments about, I will see people like saying you're the reason I got into engineering. They're like, I have a kid who loves watching your videos, and I'm super glad he's watching you because he's like learning things. So promoting engineering and science and technology and innovation through entertaining videos, I feel like is a pretty good, um, you know, it's definitely a good motive to keep going and like a good mark to leave. Like it feels like I'm doing something good. And
Yeah.
if I'm entertaining and educating, that's great. And hopefully, moving forward, I can develop things that will help people even more. Like I want to you know, make inventions that make people's lives easier. I think that'd be really cool. So, but for right now, it's like if I can entertain someone and educate, like that's amazing. And another thing too, like when you get those negative comments, because it's not about me, like a lot of these lifestyle people, the content's just about them, it's their personality. But because for what I do, it's just about the thing I made, it's like I'm a little removed, so I don't really give a shit if you say something bad. Like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. This thing I made isn't good, whatever. But versus someone saying like you suck, it's like that hits a little harder.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
so
interesting. I guess I haven't particularly thought about that too much, but that brings up a good point about it's not necessarily you that's like you're putting things out there, but it isn't
mhm.
necessarily completely you.
It's not
Um,
completely exactly.
Interesting. So
So yeah.
so then with that, how do you see the company growing then? Because at this point you have a
Mhm.
legitimate company, you're making
Mhm.
content, you're starting to make like you just put out your web shooter I don't know
Mhm.
toys invention, I don't know
Oh
what you
yeah,
want to
yeah. We
call it,
just
but
launched. Yeah.
um but with that being said, like how do you see do you have a plan for how you want to grow, or are you guys just going to keep doing what you're doing and kind of see where it goes, or do you kind of have a vision of where you want to push, JlaserVideo like as a
Mhm.
company?
Yeah, we have tentative goals for sure. The thing about this space though is like who knows what's going to happen. So we are trying to think, 5, 10 years out, but those have to be a little bit broader just because of the nature of the space we're in. So like some of my goals, like make this company like a household name would be amazing. Like, like Mythbusters or Bill Nye, like something like that. Like this educational company would be great. Like have that be known as a name. Like Jay Laser or whatever it is, my name,
Right,
Jake
right.
Laser. Like that would be very cool. As I mentioned before, like create meaningful products that can help people would be another amazing goal for later down the road. But we're right now we're really having fun with seeing what opportunities come our way and trying to take advantage of them and like just growing more of those branches I was talking about earlier. Like yeah, just expanding in new ways that people haven't done before. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't, but like, you know, it's fun to try either way. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Well, that's super exciting, man. I think
Mhm.
that kind of honestly, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap up with a lot of the
Okay,
questions I had. I guess
cool.
for a final
Those are
kind
good questions.
of thanks, I
Yeah.
appreciate
Mhm.
it. I guess for a
Yeah.
final question, and this kind of feeds off of what we were just talking about, but do you have any
Mhm.
advice for, let's say, some of the younger people that you hope to inspire,
Mhm.
like whether it's going after your dreams or following STEM or they can do
Mhm.
whatever they want? I don't know. Like any words of wisdom kind of from this path and seeing how it's worked out for you?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of how to say something not super cliche, but a lot of
It's so difficult.
people, it's so difficult. I know, like, all right, it's gonna be a little cliche, but like a lot of people get cornered into having to make decisions for like money or whatever other people are like they get pushed into areas where they're not thriving and happy. I think if you can do something like prioritize doing something that brings you joy or like whatever it is, even if it's like not going to make you as much money up front or whatever, or it's not going to bring you as much immediate satisfaction. If you're getting that joy out of it, you'll work much harder at it. You'll be much happier doing it. And because of those things, you'll probably end up being more successful doing those things. So like I'm keeping it super general because everyone has different interests, but like, for me, it was doing YouTube or whatever. Like it it didn't pay anywhere near as well as if I just went and got a real job at first. Like it took years to build that up, but like now the payoff's much better. I'm much happier doing it. So, there will be a lot of pressure to just do what people want you to do right now, the traditional thing, sure. But if that's not for you, don't be afraid to, I guess, not go that route and do what does make you happy. So,
Well, hopefully, if anybody's learned anything
mhm.
from your experience, it's that it takes a long time to get really
Yeah,
good at something, and it takes a
doesn't
long
happen overnight.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it takes,
Mhm.
I mean, in your case, 10 years of consistent work.
Yeah.
And with that being
But
said, look at
you'll
where you
enjoy
what
those 10 years.
well, right,
Yeah.
that's the other
You
part.
know,
The only
that's the
reason you're
thing.
able to the only reason you're able to do it is because you enjoy it so much. And so
Exactly.
because of that, um yeah, because of that, you're able to just do work for a long period of time that if you didn't like it, there's no way you'd be able to
Exactly.
stay as
That's
motivated.
what keeps you going.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter if anything comes of it because you just genuinely like doing it. You would do it anyway. Like I would do this for free. I would do my job for free. Like
There's
as long
there's
as it,
some
yeah.
there's something to be said too about being like when you're when you're as passionate or as in something as you are, people can tell too. Like you can
Totally.
tell when somebody's
Yeah.
doing something because they're being paid for it or because they want
Hmm.
money or clout or whatever
Hmm.
it is. But when you're doing something because you're like you said, I'd be doing this no matter what, and I truly enjoy what I do. People can
Hmm.
tell, and but that especially in today's day and age, like authenticity, like is really important to people with everything going on, and so
Yeah, I know.
it works for you. So that's awesome.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah,
thanks
man.
for talking with me, man. This was really cool. It was good to get some
Yeah.
insight kind of into how your experience with YouTube and everything has been going on. So hopefully we can catch up again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. This is
Yeah, no
been a
problem.
lot of fun.
Anytime. Have a
Mhm.
good rest of your weekend.
You too.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Jake Laser. If you want to find out more about Jake, I've linked his YouTube channel and his website in the description below. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a great day.